I recently had a free consultation with Cash Coin. Super dope name, by the way. He is the product and program manager at Moody's, and they are an enterprise organization in the financial space with over 11,000 users. And Cash brought up a lot of great questions that we were able to resolve on the call. I pulled together some key moments from our conversation, and I wanted to share those with all of you that might be in a similar place looking for similar solutions. I can almost guarantee you that at least one or two of these you've either struggled with before or are currently struggling with now, so hopefully it helps you alleviate some problems within your Jira environment. Let's jump in.
My biggest issue is, and this, I don't even know if this is a Jira issue or there's something that you can do in Jira to help me, are two things. One is having the team members keep their statuses up to date. You know, we're getting more vigilant in our scrums on making sure that happens, which has been helpful.
Have you tried anything along the lines of having automation that maybe pings them in the comments after X amount of time has passed? Okay, you've tried and it doesn't work?
Yeah, well, I have some of that. I have some follow-up fields, which have dates and for, reminders of things to follow up on. And I also use the 4 dots on the Scrum board, as an indicator to me that when we're in the Scrum meeting, I hover over them just to show them, well, it's been here a while. What's going on with that?
A little bit more specific. I don't know if you've tried this in particular, but adding a JQL for a task that, let's say, hasn't been updated in 48 hours. So literally no action, no status changes, no field changes. Then you could drop a comment in there to the assignee saying, hey, is this like up to date? Just verifying whatever. If they add a comment, or you don't have to necessarily have them add an action there, but that's a great way to kind of remind them and ping them on something that has just been sitting there without any update for X amount of time. But yeah, I mean, in terms of trying to get updates to come in, that's a tough one. That really is like really a team training thing, right? Like a process thing. I don't know. I've seen some teams do this successfully. Some don't really like it, but maybe even like a gamified version of something like that, where you kind of reward them for keeping things up to date and having progress made on certain tasks.
Oh, that's good.
A few ways. Yeah, there's a few ways you could do that. There's a couple of options. You could either like kind of structure that internally, or there's some apps that I've used here and there that have helped with that. Some teams are great at that and just don't need any kind of reminders. Other teams, you have to really, really push.
Okay, yeah, I like that aspect of something like gamifying. I can think of some interesting things to do there.
So first thing here, as soon as Cash said, I don't think this is a Jira thing, usually when you think that, it's usually not. So in this case, the problem that Cash mentioned was the teams aren't updating the statuses on their boards. There's a few things we could do in Jira that can help with this. If it were me, I'd probably start by setting a standard and a goal for my own team and make sure that everybody understands the expectation. We could also roll training into how to update these statuses, when, why, and how often. That way we get very clear and defined on the expectation, but at its core, it's really a problem with expectation. Now, I definitely recommend trying out a few tactics that I'll mention in a moment, but I'd also do this in parallel with your team to make sure that your standards are set and everybody's on the same page.
Another thing, and I don't know how we can, having product managers create good stories, and I know that's definitely not a Jira thing, but a lot of times we're not getting that, so I don't know if that's something you can help with.
You could also add in like a default value with something like an example shown prior to actually filling it out. That way, when they go to fill it out, they have like a really good example of what it should.
That's a good idea. I like that. Let me.
You could either do that with the default value or just toss it into description. One of those options tends to work pretty well. Sometimes even adding a link to the description to like, here's a really great example. Click here to take a look really quick before you write up this story. That's also a really great alternative.
But yeah, I like the default populating because that can help remind them to give us the information that's needed, like a structure. Yeah.
And once again, Cash does mention here that this may not be a Jira thing, which is probably a good sign that it may not be. But in this particular case, there's actually 2 really good things we could do to help individuals write better user stories. The first thing I suggest doing is adding a default value to the field that is being filled out. And this could show you the exact outline, the format, all the information that should be filled out and in the way that it should be filled out for that field. The reason I don't always love this approach is because when someone actually goes to type something in, that default value disappears and it's hard to remember and actually be able to go through and match the exact format that is displayed there. The second way, and the option that I like a little bit more, is the description field. So you could do something similar here where you lay out the instructions and the format of what things should look like in the actual field. But on top of that, you could embed a URL or a link to a Google Doc, a Confluence page, or somewhere where you actually have a lot more in-depth information on how it needs to be done, why it needs to be done that way, and then any other general context information that you'd like to provide. You can play around with both of these, or in some cases even use both at the same time.
So if you have a user story and it has 5 subtasks. The problem is, so we'll have something for the UI team, something for the API team, something for the database team, and something for QA. When we bring it into a sprint, the UI team might be working on it for almost the entire sprint, but it's sitting there in the queues for the other team members because it's part of the sprint. I can't just bring a subtask into a sprint. I have to bring the whole story. And that has always caused some consternation. And the only other way I know how to break it out is instead of having subtasks, just have separate tasks linked to that story, but then you don't get a lot of the relationship. It's there, but it's not as evident,
Yeah, I see a lot of teams moving away from the subtask idea for that, pretty much that reason. And if you wanted some kind of hierarchy to tie it together, I don't know how you're currently using epics, but if you have separate, tracks and teams, having an epic with like that one overarching thing and then splitting that into stories and tasks is probably a better approach than subtasks. I would consider looking at removing subtasks if they're a big bottleneck. That way you don't have anyone creating them by accident. A team I just worked with on a more enterprise level, they pretty much got rid of all their subtasks from all their projects, and they have like 30 plus development teams, 50 plus development projects, and they got rid of them just because of that problem. You could also have other hierarchies. Again, it really depends on how you're currently using epics. If you have a very strong process around them already, it might be a little bit more challenging to utilize an epic for that. You could always potentially restructure. If you're on premium, you could have any kind of amount of hierarchy like within your software project.
Okay, subtasks. This is a hard one to talk about because it is so conditional to the team that is working in Jira. Some organizations love subtasks and just cannot do without them, while others like Moody's do struggle with them, as you can see here. For the most part, I will say that development teams that I've worked with, they tend to move away and actually get rid of their subtasks because of some of the issues that Cash brought up. If you are a team that's already using them and you're very heavily dependent on them, I'd suggest slowly phasing out of using subtasks and then actually migrating the old subtasks into a regular task and then making sure that they're linked to the original epics to not lose any of that data. And then once you've migrated that out, you want to make sure to remove that issue type altogether. If you don't remove the issue type, you will 100% still have teams using them no matter what. So just remove the issue type, get rid of it altogether if you can, if you're migrating away from it, and you'll thank me later.
I'm dealing with multiple teams, multiple stakeholders, multiple products. And like I have to report up to like 3 or 4 levels. Okay, so if I'm reporting up 3 levels, each of those levels is a level in Jira, and then you get the story and you get the subtask, and you run out.
Yeah, components are a great way to categorize those items as well. I've seen teams use components as like UI team, dev team, or like whatever else. So if you're not using those in any other places, or maybe you have like a label field you could use, but components is a pretty common one to categorize in that way. Are you using the plans view or like advanced roadmaps at all?
Oh yeah. In fact, we started using that last year, and that has really helped us prioritize and keep focus. And in fact, we work on a quarterly basis, and every quarter I update my Scrum filters to only show issues that are in a particular child set, portfolio issues, children of a particular portfolio issue. And that helps us from having people put things in the wrong place, and helps us keep focus on exactly what we need to. So yeah, that has been a tremendous help. Yeah, it's good if I can use a native Jira one as opposed to a one that I create, which I've done for some other things.
Yeah, I mean, custom fields tend to be pretty good use case for that, as long as you're not using a label field, because those are terrible to manage.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
they're getting better, but
try not to use those.
yeah, anything that's a multi-select dropdown is a pretty good option. But honestly, labels might actually be a good option moving forward, because Atlassian's making a lot of changes to that field in particular, and you can actually go in and start removing labels, adding labels. I don't know how far that'll extend. Maybe they'll make it very locked down in the future, but it is getting a little bit more robust.
Yeah, the labels, they just don't necessarily provide the structure we need.
Yeah,
okay.
I recommend to stay away from labels almost at all costs. It's like You could use them as like a personal label field for like your own stuff if you want some of your own categorization, but not to
And that,
standardize.
yeah, and that's what everyone does. And I say, yeah, just use the label because we're not going to care what you put in there. I
Yep.
mean, we put a few things in there, common things, but otherwise, you know, that if you put something in there, it's not going to impact us, anyone else.
All right, labels. So I could rant on about this for quite a while, but let me hit on the couple of reasons that you pretty much never want to use labels and some alternatives that you could use instead. So the core problem with labels is that when you start using them, it's very hard to standardize. So I might create a label called UX, and then someone goes in and types UX with lowercase or one lowercase letter, and now we have a new label. So this is obviously going to be super problematic for reporting in JQL. For example, if I have a board that I'm pulling in tasks from based on the label, and those labels start to get messed up, I'm automatically pulling in the wrong tasks. Same thing with reporting. As soon as you start to get into reporting and seeing burn down charts, workload, etc., it's going to be very hard to report on that label if it's not accurate and consistent. And they're really not consistent just because there's no standardization around them. That has been changing a little bit more. There's ways to add and remove labels that Atlassian's rolling out slowly, and maybe we'll get more standardization around it down the road. But as of today, I recommend two alternatives. The first one is just a component. I typically look at a component and use it as kind of the first layer of filtering within your projects. So any kind of a big element that you're filtering around, I would put that into your components. The second recommendation is going to be a custom field, specifically a multi-select. If you'd like, you could use a single select if you know that there's never going to be any other options, but multi-select is going to give you essentially that label feel without any of the label downside. So you could go in and remove and add values from the admin side, but all the users get to select and pick an existing value. And as I mentioned to Cash, a great way to use the label field is just to let anyone use it however they want. So if I want to start categorizing things my own way, I could use the labels field for that. If someone else on my team wants to do the same thing, there's no governance around it. Everyone can just go around and categorize things however they'd like without impacting anyone else's work.
Sounds like you're using Jira pretty well. It's not very common that I hear you're kind of on the right path. Most teams are just completely way off.
Well, I mean, I've had the time, and I was fortunate to have some experience with Jira in my last position. I'm not an admin, but after asking too many questions, they just gave me admin capability. And I haven't touched anything except for my projects, and all my automation rules are only for my projects. So I can be very careful from that standpoint not to mess anyone else up. But it has made it possible for me to get things done far quicker than if I had to go to the admin team every time. But yeah, these suggestions are good, so that'll help. I can I'll think about components. I can that's another good one to think about because we're not using the components really. Things with Jira, I think this is good service that you guys provide, just kind of a free form, and because I've done a lot with it, and I'm sure, and there are a lot of other things I still need to explore from the product discovery area is where I'm going to delve into next.
So generally speaking, Cash's environment is actually fairly well run, and Cash is very well versed within Jira and the Atlassian suite, which is a little bit less typical with the consultations I do, but they do have a pretty good grip on how they're using Jira and the governance around it. One of the key things that I like to mention is standardization and scalability. As your team grows, especially if you're a fast-growing company with development teams, marketing, HR, IT teams that are using Jira, if you don't take the time to build a scalable solution up front, you're gonna have to take a lot more time later to go back and rebuild and re-implement the things that should have been done the right way. Jira is a phenomenal tool and it could scale really well with teams. But again, if you're implementing it in the wrong way to begin with, you're gonna have to go through and do a lot of remediation, migration from team managed to company managed projects, fixing your workflows, priority schemes, etc. We work with a lot of teams that already got to that point where they need to fix a lot of things within their environment. And that's when we end up coming in to help remediate and fix those issues. In some cases, we do catch teams before they get too far. We're able to help structure and plan things out in the right way to help them scale. And those teams are far better off than the ones that have to remediate later.